Good morning and welcome to our Wednesday Bible study. We apologize for being a few minutes late today. It's because we were out doing ministry in the community, delivering food and checking in on some folks. So it was all good work and God's work. I'm so thankful to our Ladles of Love volunteers for we went a day early, and for John for helping out, and even my girls got to come along. So I know you'll forgive us for being about 10 minutes late today. But I want to just jump right in today to Proverbs Chapter 1, starting at verse 8. We started our journey through Proverbs last week, and so we're continuing to journey through that. I invited you last week to go ahead and read about the first 8 or 9 chapters of Proverbs. So if you did, great. If you didn't, that's okay. Try it this week. But what you're going to notice is that these first 8 or 9 chapters don't sound a lot like the Proverbs that you're used to hearing, the ones that you crochet into your blankets and hang on your walls anyway, those sort of 2-line sayings, those 2-line wisdom sayings that you're so used to. Instead, you get some stories. You get some stories about Lady Wisdom, and you get some stories about an instructor and a pupil, father and son, mother and son, in several different ways. So we're going to dive into that. Here's the first of one of these stories of instruction, starting in verse 8 today. So let's listen and read together. "Hear, my child, your father's instructions, and do not reject your mother's teaching, for they are a fair garland for your head and pendants for your neck. My child, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us wantonly ambush the innocent. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of costly things. We shall fill our house with booty. Throw in your lot among us. We will all have one purse. My child, do not walk in their way. Do or keep your foot from their paths. For their feet run to evil, and they hurry to shed blood. For in vain is the net baited while the bird is looking on. Yet they lie in wait to kill themselves and set an ambush for their own lives. Such is the end of all who are greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its possessors." Not maybe the most uplifting word, but an important word of warning and caution. So what do you hear right off the bat? My child, your father's instructions, your mother's teachings. This is actually a very common way in the ancient Near East that sages would teach. Even though it might be a teacher and a pupil, they would often still address one another as father and son. What's interesting and what's different about Proverbs here than what you would find in a lot of other wisdom writings in the ancient Near East that would be not in the Hebrew Bible but in other religions or other philosophical traditions, you would see father and son, but you wouldn't see the mention of the mother. And here you do have that. It's different. In this Jewish Israelite book, it opens not just by talking about the father's instruction to the son or the sage's instruction to the pupil, but also do not reject your mother's teaching. Father and mother are kind of put together here. They both have teaching that needs to be heard and listened to. And so you get a picture of the family unit. And you're going to notice that throughout this passage, some talk about the family unit. You're going to notice it throughout the first chapter. You're going to notice it throughout the book of Proverbs that there's an emphasis being placed on that family unit. You can probably think back to some of those one-liner Proverbs about how they're lifting up the family as a unit and talking about more values, ethics among the family. The family was an important unit in ancient Israel. What's interesting about the way that Israel saw and understood the family unit, it's through a word, the Greek word, as we translate it. Now, this is written in Hebrew, but if we go to the Greek translation of that Hebrew and the way it's spoken of in the New Testament, the word oikos, it's not just, and it's similar in the Hebrew language, it's not simply the family, mom, dad, and children. First of all, it will be an extended family. Families live together. It was the common practice that a family unit would include the grandparents, if there were great-grandparents around, aunts and uncles and cousins would all live in the same residential household facility. And so you can imagine that the more people that are a part of that family unit, the more the bigger it is. It's just not just a mom and dad and a child, but there's all these other people. There's a lot more people to worry about. There's a lot more food that you got to procure, living space, all those kind of things. And so that word oikos in the Greek also has an economic meaning to it. The family unit was the base economic unit in ancient Israel. So that's kind of going on here too when you hear these proverbs. It's not just family in terms of morals, values, and ethics, but those morals, values, and ethics also have an economic dimension to it. In other words, it's not simply the things that we believe, the things that we say. It's also how we go about and live our lives, and how we spend our money, and how we take care of one another through financial means. So all of that is part of this emphasis on family in the book of Proverbs. And if you can think about some of those famous one-liner proverbs, you probably can think of some that have a financial or economic slant to them. What's one of the most common ones? A penny
earned.
Yeah. There's a version of that in Proverbs, right?
Spent is earned.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Penny saved is a penny earned, or something like that. So you're gonna notice some of those pop up, that there's that economic slant to some of these, which I think is a little different than the way we tend to think about values and morals and ethics. We tend to put the financial stuff separately in our day, and we look at morals and values and ethics as more of a what we think and believe and maybe do, but it doesn't always have a financial bent to it. Well, in the Proverbs it does. And so you'll need to pay attention to that as we move through the book. This particular section, there's going to be 10 instructional poems like this that are going to happen throughout these chapters. And this is the first of them. And this one is warning against what? If you're online and listening, you could type in chat, maybe even, and give an answer. What is it warning against? If you were to say it in one or two words, what's the concern, the problem?
The people you surround yourself with.
People you surround yourself with, and particularly, how are those people in this story acting?
Not smartly.
Not like what?
Like people.
Not like people. Surely not like people. Yeah. There's even metaphors that are comparing them to animals and other vicious things. I would maybe summarize it by saying that people's greed is really the what's being spoken against here. So if we go back and look at the psalm, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us wait for the innocent like Sheol, to swallow them alive. Okay, so that's pretty gruesome. But what's the purpose? Why are we lying in wait? What are we trying to get? Look in the next sentence.
What they have.
What they have.
Yeah.
We'll find all kinds of costly things if we hide and lie in wait and ambush them. We'll get material goods, right? Fill our houses with booty, like pirates' booty. Not a word that we use for material goods as much these days, but it was at one time.
Neither is plunder.
Neither is plunder. Is that the way yours translates it? Good. So we'll get all kinds of plunder. So yes, they want stuff, and they want more of it, and they're willing to sneak up, attack, and take when folks aren't aware that it's going to happen. So we're literally talking about thieves. I think thieves, criminals. We're stealing from folks. Throw in your lot among us, and we'll all have one purse. In other words, we'll share the bounty that we'll share the plunder. We'll split it up and divide. And you can imagine, that might sound good to a young child who maybe doesn't have much for themselves. And in ancient Israel, the families were very patriarchal. The male controlled all the flow of resources. So for a young child to hear this, ooh, I might get something here that I'm not going to get with my family. So this might be appealing to lure me away from my family and into where I can actually have control and access over some goods and services that otherwise I might not have access to. So there's something alluring, and the speaker, or at least the way that the speaker in the Proverbs is trying to say, here's what those evil folks say, it's a very alluring idea here. So then he comes back in and says, hey, my child, don't walk in that way. Keep your foot from their paths. And what I hope that you're noticing here, if you've been a part of our church for a while, in our study through the Psalms, there's a lot of language in here that sounds a lot like Psalms. Because in the Psalms, even the very opening Psalm, Psalm 1, talks about the path of the righteous and the path of the wicked. And which way are you going to go? Don't take the path of the wicked, because that's going to lead to death. It's going to lead to bad things happening. Take the path of righteousness, and then you'll be like a tree planted by streams of water. There's Psalm 1 for you. Well, you get that same language, that same idea here. Don't walk in the way of these evil, greedy folks. Keep your foot from their paths. Their feet run to evil. They hurry to shed blood. Here's another piece that sounds a lot like the Psalms. In vain is the net baited while the bird is looking on. The idea here is that if the bird is, up on its perch and the bird is watching the trap being laid, is the bird likely to go get in the trap? No, not as likely. So what more can we understand from that metaphor? The bird is likely to escape the trap, not fall into it, and the people who set it are more likely to get trapped in their own trap. And that's exactly what the psalm is nudging us towards here, because the very next sentence, they lie in wait. They're not going to get the bird. They're going to kill themselves. They're going to be a victim of their own traps. In other words, evil catches up with you. Wrong catches up with you, and it will trap you in its own doings. And that's an idea we see in a lot of the Psalms. If you remember back, a lot of the psalmists pray for that to happen. They're asking God, don't let me get caught in the trap of these folks who are out there doing wrong. Instead, let them get caught in their own trap. And when you see some of the Psalms offering praise and thanks for God stepping in and intervene, you see those exact words being spread. You kept me safe, and they were victims of their own evil doings. Thank you, God. So that this sounds very similar to some Psalms in that way. What's different here, though, is in the Psalms, you might hear someone praying for that to happen or giving thanks for it. Here, you see a warning from a father to a child, a mother to a child, or a teacher to a pupil. It's a warning against these folks. Stay away from that. And so it comes in what I would say is a more didactic form. And by didactic, I'm just meaning in a more educational form. So it's a different genre of literature, but it's teaching the same point. It's teaching it through a conversation between a teacher and a student instead of a song or a prayer, as the Psalms are teaching it through. So we talked about that last week, how there's many different kinds of literature in the Bible. Proverbs is a unique kind of like Job, in terms of it being wisdom literature. So we're going to need to read it a little bit differently than some other books of the Bible. You don't read history like you read poetry. And so we can't read wisdom literature in the same way that we read the books of like 1st and 2nd Kings, because they're more historical. You can't read it the same as you're going to read the parables of Jesus. It's going to have different nuances to it. And so I hope you're beginning to see what some of those are in this section of the Psalms here. Let's see. A couple other little interesting tidbits. As I was reading this, when we look at those first couple verses, verse I think 2 or 3, hear my child, your father's instructions, don't reject your mother's teaching, for they are a fair garland for your head. What in the world is that image about? There's a metaphor happening there. Where do we put garlands on your head when in ancient Rome, when what had happened? When you had,
Crown.
it's like a crown, right? When you won an athletic event. Think back to the Olympic Games as they originally got started, right? That's the crowning achievement of winning, is you got a garland placed on your head. There's the idea here that by following the teachings of your family, your household, you'll be crowned. You will win. You'll achieve what you've set out to achieve, what you need to achieve. You'll find yourself in the winner's circle. Pendants around your neck. So sort of we think you win a horse race, and what do they put around the horse's neck? And you put like a garland of flowers right around your neck. So those are, I think, the kind of images that are going on in those verses. Interesting ones. Another last piece that I'll point out here for today is comes about verse 13. And if you can jump there, it talks about seeking and finding. We shall find all kinds of costly things. That's not what we want to find. It's what those evil, greedy folks want to find. Costly things from people that they ambush. But you're going to notice this theme of seeking and finding coming up throughout the book of Proverbs and other wisdom literature like Job, for example. We're constantly searching for wisdom. And the search for wisdom is long, it's deep, it's important, and it's a spiritual journey. It has to do with our family and the household. It has to do with searching after the fear of God. We talked about that last week, that as verse 7 ended in Proverbs chapter 1. What did it say? The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. Fear not in terms of being afraid, but in terms of respect, right? And so there's this ongoing metaphor of searching, seeking, and finding wisdom. What happens in this story, though, right, that we've read, is they find material goods because of their greed. The implication is that you found the wrong thing. Your search has been after material goods rather than wisdom and fear of God. And so it's kind of that counter narrative, if you will. They are searching for the wrong thing. They are finding the wrong thing. Instead, as verse 7 closed, we need to be searching for wisdom. And that search begins with fear of God. And so pay attention as you read chapters 1 through 9. Again, if you didn't read them, try to read them again this week. Pay attention to how often you see that language show up. Seek, find, discover, in terms of wisdom and understanding throughout Proverbs, because it's going to show up again and again and again. So, again, I close today with this is a reminder. Be careful what you go looking for. If you're searching after the material goods of the world, if you're searching after wealth and fame and status and celebrity and all those kind of things, you may find them, but you haven't found wisdom. And in reality, what you're doing to find all that stuff is going to catch you in its own trap. And you'll find that you're a victim of the very evil and wrong ways that you've gone out in life to pursue those things, as you take them from people in wrong ways, as you engage in the world in a way that is harmful and unkind and evil towards other people. What should you do then? Well, so far, we've only got listen to your mama and your daddy. What are mama and daddy going to say? Well, we're going to get that later in the book of Proverbs. But the point here at the beginning is, like every teacher stands up on the first day of class and says, rule number 1, listen. Right? Rule number 1. Rule number 1 in the book of Proverbs, listen. Don't follow after what those folks are doing. Listen to your teacher. Take in the instruction. It will be the right path, the good path that you need to follow. If you go after those other ways, you're going to find yourself getting caught in some bad places. Listen. Don't be a victim of the evil that you might end up seeking after. Listen to mama and daddy. All right, so we'll keep journeying through. We'll pick up around verse 20 of Proverbs next week. Thank you if you're on Facebook or our conference call. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to hop on to our time of prayer this morning. You can join us at 563-999-1222 for a time of prayer and sharing of our prayer concerns. We won't post those on Facebook as some of them are private, but we hope that you'll join us there. Thanks.